A lot of people are hyping Iska as the new Star-Lord, the new Shou. Does she live up to the hype? Oh, and Juggernaut's here too, I guess. Isca the Unbeaten is the Season Pass Plus card for this month, and she is making a big impression in the early metagame. As a 4/3 with an end-of-turn ability that doubles her power if you're losing the location that she's at, Isca represents not just a lot of points, but a very large potential threat. In addition, she's done a lot to revive the previously not so much dead, but perhaps dormant Invisible Woman First Steps archetype. Largely, this card hits at a very reasonable rate, and I do think that it is the best of the three cards that released when the season started, but I also think that it's sort of being put into conversations that it probably doesn't belong in. Iska's a good card, a very good card even, but I don't think she rises to the level of a Shou and a Star-Lord. Unlike Shou, she affects one lane and is relatively easy to disrupt, and unlike Star-Lord, her overpoweringness ability to go over the top simply isn't there in the same degree. This is a very good card, but people that are hyping it as the third coming, I'm just not seeing it. That said, she is absolutely one of the better cards to come out recently. So let's take a look at what she is rather than focusing on what she isn't. The first and most important impact that Iska had on the metagame is reviving the Invisible Woman First Steps deck. Now, this is not necessarily a bad thing for the deck. What functionally this deck does is turn Iska into a button that says, win any lane that you put me in once you have set up the Invisible Woman combo. It's sort of like the rich man's Juggernaut almost, which when I put it like that, sounds like a really good thing to do. But a full combo that guarantees one lane win with some notable counter cards out there is actually a little bit more dangerous than you'd think. When I played this list, it felt like it was very difficult for me to comprehensively feel confident snapping into anything that might have an inkling of running a Cosmic Ghost Rider. The deck does combo stuff well, but as a combo deck, it's fairly potent, and as a mid-range deck, it's, you know, it does some things, but it has the exact same weaknesses both as a combo deck and as a mid-range deck. And I think that's actually like a pretty notable thing about this list. One of the things that I think a lot of people look at when it comes to Marvel Snap is like, okay, I've got this mid-range deck that has this over-the-top combo play, but a lot of what makes those things valuable is that you can use them in different matchups and you don't necessarily need to do one only. And the more I play with this list, the more it feels like what it actually is a pure combo list. Like, I don't really think I'm mid-ranging a lot out of these games. I'm either doing half my combo or I'm leaving the game. Like, if I'm not doing at least half of what I'm trying to do with this deck, like multiplying a Jocasta Mega Sentinel or whatever, or multiplying a Jocasta Invisible Woman, I just am not doing any points. And so that really feels like a meaningful difference from the last time this deck was good, which was when it could be a mid-range deck and also a combo deck, but the point ceiling has gotten a little bit higher in Marvel Snap, and you can't really mid-range people out without multiple Havok procs now. You can't just be like, oh yeah, my 2/7 because I activated Invisible Woman First Steps one time. It's not cutting it. And so this deck feels a lot closer to like a Mr. Negative, but all your stuff is on the board, or like a Star-Lord kind of thing than it does to anything else right now. And it really is, when we talk about Iska, impossible to ignore the giant flaming skull in the room. Every Invisible Woman deck gets put into the dirt by this. Like, even if you are going to be like, oh, I'm going to play my Cosmo to do that, you're taking your turn off when you're Cosmoing and saying, I am comboing less, right? Like, oh, I'm going to do a Cosmo. Well, that means that you're sacrificing part of your combo because now you're not Prodigying or whatever, right? Like, that's an actual serious thing that you're giving up in order to prevent getting Cosmic Ghost Rider. And I think it's like a fine thing to do, but once you start doing that, it's like, why am I doing this in the first place? Why am I all-inning this combo that I don't get all the time, and then I need to protect in addition to that? It's not Iska's fault. This card is also naturally pretty good against her, but this is more like a structural issue with the Invisible Woman First Steps deck and less about her as a card. It's just that that's a place that you're going to see a lot of her, and I kind of think it just gets eaten alive by this stuff. Like, even if you are getting Cosmos into this, you are still in a situation where in order to get the Cosmo into the lane you need to get it in, you are giving up a multiplier on your output. You can do it. It's not wrong to do it. If you want to go get a Cosmo into that deck that I just showed you, you can do that. It's just, it's a big ask. Another place that Iska has been showing up is in the Doom 2099 lists, which I already think were pretty good. In theory, what she's adding is the ability to go tall on specific lanes, which is a pretty useful thing to add. In practice, though, you'd basically always rather play Doom 2099 than her, and then you'd always rather play a 5-drop than her, and then it's like, well, I guess she's here for when we don't do that, but you don't really need the ability to go tall in 2 lanes as much when you aren't Doom 2099ing, because that's the reason you want the ability to like stack a bunch of points in one lane, is because you tend to run out of board space. It's a little bit muddled here. I think that it's very reasonable to expect Iska to maintain her place in this deck, but I also think it's a lot closer than you'd think between Iska, Iron Lad, and the third 3-drop in a list like this, and that is going to be a pretty important decision plan. Like, she's definitely like cards, in my opinion, like 10 through 12 in the list. She's in that group, the bottom quartile here. Like, this is not particularly a card that is blowing me away in a list like this. It's just pretty good. Now, I will also say, I think Doom 2099 was already really good. I've done a couple of weeks worth of videos where I'm saying this is a deck that I think most people should be playing a lot more of. But if you're getting into the high elo ranges, it starts getting a good deal worse because of how predictable it can be. That said, it's still solid here. Iska is still doing some interesting stuff. One of the interesting things about her, though, is that it's almost better to hit her off of an Iron Lad than it is to actually play her out in any way. Like, again, she's not bad here, but I don't feel like she's a core piece of what this deck is doing in a way that will guarantee that this will be a spot for her continuously. It feels like she's one of several pieces that you can bring in and out depending on what you're looking for, but far from a core constituent of what this deck is trying to do. And, you know, it's a deck named after one card. It's pretty hard to be a core constituent in a deck named after one card if you're not one of those cards. But I mean, Aurora did it, right? Like Moondragon did it. Like it's possible to do. And I don't necessarily think she gets to that level. She does provide a nice dimension of verticality in a very horizontal deck, but I'm not necessarily sure that this is a permanent home for her. Interestingly, this is the version of Iska that I think I've seen the most played against me, just like a very all-in end of turn deck. And I don't think it's bad. I just think it has some Cosmic Ghost Rider problems, but like this deck does numbers really well. Fundamentally though, what I enjoy about this version is that it gets closer to actually being a deck that can win without the combo. It's just, it requires all 12 slots in your deck to get you there, and it becomes a little bit harder to actually get any kind of tech in here. The thing that this deck needed to do to sort of alleviate what I talked about with the previous Iska deck, which is like, you're just a combo deck, it's face up on the board, so your opponent is either going to beat you or they're going to know what's going on and leave. This deck is able to actually play those mid-range games where you're not full comboing better. And I think in part that is because it is fully dedicated itself to being this, so it is able to do more like, you know, oh, I've got like 2 Marvel boys, and that's like pretty sick, right? I don't have a good Prodigy target, so I Prodigy'd my Marvel boy. I can pivot a little bit better, right? I think that's a value add. It's just that every card you take out of this piece means that you are going to be less and less able to have that be true. And so the question for this deck is, how many of these cards can we afford to lose? Can we take 2 cards out and get like a Cosmo and something else in there? Is that a thing we can do? Because once we start being able to do that, I start being a lot more interested in this. It's just like the cards we want to take out. Okay, what's the card I want to take out? Oh, I want to take out a 1-drop. All right, guess I have to take out Marvel Boy now. Then I start losing all of those things that I'm talking about where like this is a better deck at mid-ranging it out. And if this isn't a better deck at mid-ranging it out, then what's the point of it existing at all? Largely, that's sort of the space that I'm in with this archetype. I remain hopeful that maybe there is another version of Invisible Woman that is able to properly middle, being both a mid-range deck and a combo deck at the same time. I am not confident that either of these lists are currently at it. And Iska, if she wants to maintain her status as like, you know, a card people talk about like Star-Lord and them, I kind of think she's going to need it, because I don't think these decks are going to be able to maintain that status over the course of a month. She's a pretty interesting fit in Aurora, which can be hard up for points sometimes. A lot of what this deck is interested in is just cards with different keywords that can be a lot of points, and then attempting to keep your opponent in control with things like Stardust and Cosmo and Mercury, and sometimes you'll get like a Mobius in here or whatever. All of that kind of stuff is pretty straightforward. This is obviously a deck that values her not just for her body, but for her end of turn ability. Like, just being an end of turn is pretty good here. Verticality is something these decks can lack, and of the lists that we've talked about so far, this is the one that I think is likely to be not necessarily the safest home for her, but it's the one where I can see the clearest space of, you are giving something to this deck. You are really adding a thing that this deck is not particularly great at, and if we can afford to get you in here, then we will. But what are we giving up to do that? Like, are we giving up a Blink? Is Blink even good if we're a Stardust deck? Are you going to forget about that? Because Lord knows I have, right? Like, this is the kind of deck that I think is pretty interested in what she has to offer. I think this is a reasonable space for her that I would not be surprised to see her occupying well down the line. Next up is Juggernaut Horseman of War. Juggernaut Horseman of War is a 2/2 with an objective ability. When you have 6 cards with different power in play, this guy will get +6 power. So that's a pretty cool thing. A 2/8 is a nice thing. There are things that are pretty compelling with this, but there are a couple of things that really stick out about this guy that make him a little bit more awkward than you'd think. The first is that a lot of the decks that could reasonably afford this often have something that is a little more key to their game plan than a 2/8, and would rather be doing that synergy-based thing than playing a 2/8. That's number one. The second thing is that a lot of the decks that would want a 2/8 and aren't doing synergy stuff are going to be one of two kinds of decks. The first is like a Sarah Tech deck, right? Ooh, I'm going to make this 2/8 a 1/8, and then it's going to be amazing on the final turn of the game. The second is like a Super Giant deck where the 2/8 helps you take priority, so you could set up your Negasonics and Cosmos to make sure that your opponent's synergy stuff doesn't actually get off the ground. That's really good. And that's when a 2/8 is mostly useful, is when you are able to pair it with things that are dragging your opponent down to the level that they can lose to a 2/8. So Sarah Tech is the one example, and Supergiant is the other. The problem is Sarah Tech kind of doesn't exist, and Supergiant is a deck that wants it to get priority. So the fact that this is a 2/8 later in the game, not actually that helpful, and Supergiant specifically, those cards are going to be face down. They're not even going to count for this guy. You might not even be able to turn him on. And so this is the kind of card where it's like, I think there are decks that would use a conditional 2/8, but I don't know if this is the conditional 2/8 that they're looking for. Another space that this card would be like, if you're looking for a deck that wants a conditional 2/8, we just talked about Aurora. Aurora would love a conditional 2/8, except she explicitly doesn't work with objective. Please, second dinner, make her work. The only person I've seen who actually had a Juggernaut they kind of liked was Big Baby, who's been playing it a lot in a Linley bounce list. He's sort of become a little attached to at the top of ladder recently. And I think it's a pretty reasonable direction for the deck to go. This is some interesting stuff. There's some cool things going on here, but ultimately Juggernaut is just a guy with some stats. And yeah, you'll get a 2/8 out of him, but would you rather have a 2/8, or would you rather have a card that is actually helpful to what you're trying to do? And I talked to Big Baby about this. He gave me this list. He was like, yeah, this is great. I'm doing really well with this. And then this morning, I'm going to record this video. And he's like, yeah, actually, I cut Juggernaut. I cut Juggernaut for Web Sling. And it's like, okay, what are we doing here? You cut Juggernaut for Web Sling? Like, cut for Web Sling, bro. Like, that's where this card is at. We're like, yeah, the 2/8 is fine, but I honestly just care way more about some synergy stuff. And that's sort of what Marvel Snap is about right now. This is the kind of card that thrives when there is tech to drive other people down to its level, or in the context of an Aurora deck, which is also using tech to drive other people down to its level. Very important to note that. And it doesn't thrive in the current environment because a lot of the ways you do that just don't work with it specifically. If you're talking about modern ways to play a tech deck, Aurora has sort of been synonymous with that for a while now. And I think that that's the biggest sin this card commits, is that this is the kind of card that wants to exist in the context of tech cards sort of picking apart synergies such that the underpowered bodies that create those synergies lose to a 2/8. That's the context this card wants to live in. That context really only exists in a world of Aurora right now, and Aurora does not work with this card. So here we have a Thanos deck that is playing them both and saying, I don't care, it's a 2/8, it's whatever, right? And I think that's reasonable. Like, it's still a 2/8. You're happy to have a 2/8. Like, even if it doesn't work with Aurora, it's probably better than Lizard. No arguments there. Very reasonable thing to do. But it really does highlight the sort of awkward space of a card like this, because right now, if you're trying to play a tech deck, a lot of it is going to be proactive tech. Like, it's going to be, I'm going to do this, and outside of Cosmic Ghost Ridering, like the kind of combo decks that you see, I don't really know how much reactive tech there's going to be running around. It's just a lot of like, here's my Cosmo, here's my Stardust, your thing doesn't work. Like, that seems to be the flavor of what tech is. And that is under the umbrella of Aurora. It exists as a part of her archetype, mostly. And that's fine. But it does mean that Juggernaut is losing out on a potential home. And I again reiterate my call for Second Dinner to add objective to Aurora so that Juggernaut can actually do something. So, verdict on these cards. I think that Iska is pretty good, but is likely to, unless a better version of these decks is found, just be kind of around rather than centralizing in the way that Shou and Star-Lord were. I think that it is possible that her whole deal is contingent on things that are too vulnerable to Cosmic Ghost Rider to actually reasonably pay off compared to other things that we're seeing in the metagame right now, like the ongoing Shou deck, the Batroc Shou deck. Both of those seem like more compelling spaces for her to be in. And while it is good that your combo results in a card that basically just says win one lane, that combo is very face up, and it might feel safer that the card literally says win one lane, but there's actually a lot of combos that result in numbers that are functionally close enough to saying win one lane, and she isn't all that special outside of the fact that it's almost guaranteed. That's the big thing with Iska. With Juggernaut, I think he's just a card out of time, a card out of place. There are worlds where a 2/8 that gets paired with some tech is good. We are not in the world where tech is strong enough for me to want to do that. All of the proactive tech is, all the reactive tech is kind of DOA, like Saratech, not really a thing anymore. All the proactive tech is under the auspices of Aurora, which he does not really work with. So with all of that said, thank you so much for watching. Remember to like and subscribe. I have been KMBest. You have been phenomenal, and I will see you in the next one.